we are here, probably order. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We'll do roll call since we do not have our illustrious
Lynn?
secretary here, which is Ms. Desperately. We will do a roll call for the recording. Starting with you, Al, as we...
Al Bourne.
Ellen Carrick.
Nick Pinnell.
Joe Larson. Okay, Wilson.
Jerry Good.
Tanner Coy.
Mr. Murphy.
And then we will also...
Murph's here.
Oh, and Murph's here. Thank you, Murph. I'm glad you're with us. I hope you're having a good time.
Oh, I'm down in Pilgrim Town, having a great time, eating lots of seafood.
All right, good deal. Now, if we could get Nick to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first on the agenda is election of officers. It's that time of year.
Yeah.
And I would ask if the board has any nominations for chairman. Jerry?
Nominate Mary Jo Larson for chairman.
Okay, you're just whatever. Is it mine or everybody's?
It's you.
Certain people's. Okay. Oh, okay. I'm on now? Gotcha. Okay. So we have one nomination. Do we hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay. A second nomination.
Oh, second. Oh, I'm sorry. No.
Okay. Then could we ask for a vote on that, please? And could you, since again, it's a recorder, could you just go around and say yes or no? Al?
Yes.
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 Yes? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Murph is a yes? Okay.
Murph's a yes.
Okay. Do we have a nomination for vice chair? Tanner?
Hey Nick, how would you feel about relinquishing the seat?
Okay.
Can I nominate Murph?
Okay. Is that good? Okay. Do we have any other nominations? Al?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You don't get a vote.
Murph?
You need that.
Doesn't sound like I get to, I know vote would work
Go
anyway.
ahead. Okay. Do I hear a nomination for secretary? Tanner?
Hey Al, how do you feel about being secretary?
Yes, I will continue, and it's a pretty taxing job. So, yeah.
I'll nominate Al.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. Al, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then,
No.
thank you, Murph, and treasurer. Do I hear a nomination?
I'd like to nominate Tanner.
Okay, Jerry nominates Tanner, second. Al?
Yes.
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 Okay,
Yes.
and Murph is a yes. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. We do have an addition to the agenda. Sally is going to do we've been waiting for this, her update on the Woodland Station property, and we'd like to add that immediately below the minutes, if I could get a motion to do that for a correction to the agenda. Seconded by Jerry, by Ellen, seconded by Ellen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none? Okay. And we will. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from June 4th, June 11th, and June 13th? Do I hear a motion? So moved. Jan moves to approve. She read every word of these, too. I know she did. Of course. Absolutely. Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Ellen seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay. Sally, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mary Jo. And let's see, Jason, I'll give you, if you want some of these. On your desk is a chronology of Woodland Station, and if some of you need to stand up or sit in the audience so you can see the monitors, this is a PowerPoint that was put together for the history of Woodland Station. So last December, when our new city manager came on board, I thought that it was important that he have a full history of Woodland Station and the DDA, DDA's role associated with Woodland Station. And so Mike Farina and I worked on putting this chronology together. I did the slides, so to have a graphic or pictorial image of how things have evolved over time since 2001, when the DDA was established. This was the property use map that came out of the foundation plan. The foundation plan was done very shortly, 4 months after the election took place for the DDA to be established with its proposed boundary. That was in September of 2001. There were approximately 300 to 350 eligible voters. Don't have the exact number, but there were 85 people within the boundary who had voted yes, 35 no. So the DDA was established in December of 2001. The foundation plan was adopted then in February of 2002. At that couple of years later, in 2004, Mark Fitzgerald, who was basically providing the staff for the DDA for the 2 years that it was established. He was the city manager at the time. He worked with the Saddle Club and negotiated an agreement to acquire the 9-acre property. And it was exchanged for 24 acres down on the highway just north of Walmart for the acquisition of the Saddle Club property. So there were a number of years that the agreements were put together and funding acquired, and I'm not going to go through all the funding and the bonds associated with it. This really is a presentation about the plans. So the first plan in February of 2005 is what I call the pie in the sky plan. So this, and I've got the original poster here as well. And this was a big, big dream that the DDA had and the city had for recreation center, hotel, World Theater was going on at that time as well, event plaza, a parking garage, which is underneath all of this development, residential, and retail over 1,000 square feet of retail at the time. So this was the result of doing an RFP, a request for proposal, and trying to find a master developer who was going to move forward with development of the 9 acres. And you can see also, this is Vector Bank right here, and this was going to go from Park Street all the way over to West Street. There was also negotiations with the Catholic Church at the time to have an indoor arena associated on the Catholic Church property, and the church was going to move out on 67. So there were many, many moving parts associated with this plan. And Newstrom Davis was the master developer who was part of the Pie in the Sky plan. This fell apart about shortly afterwards, and so there was kind of a similar mixed-use project that was also proposed, a little less square footage, but still had a hotel, rec center, mixed-use plaza area, and still working with the Catholic Church on an indoor-type event center. Then in 2006, there was Plan B. And Plan B was more about, no longer Newstrom Davis was involved. It was bringing together a variety of developers, individual developers, who would take a piece of this plan. We call this the Grand Plaza Plan, designed with 6 businessmen or investors at the time who were looking to develop various aspects of this plan. And I need to say that I was not involved in any of this until 2012. So this was still all driven by the current DDA board, Mark Fitzgerald and Joan Napoleon, through 2006. Let's see. Then this I called the Napoleon Plan, which was 2008. Matrix Design Group, Land Patterns, Ivan's Design put together a plan that no longer included the Catholic Church. It was more confined to the 9 acres, although it did look at possibly the Ute Chief Mobile Home Park being used for parking, so it went to surface parking as opposed to underground garage parking. And there were quite a few construction drawings associated with this. It got pretty detailed with development, but not sure who the developer would be at that time. And here's a 2008 plan that goes along with a similar approach as the previous one. And then this was the 2009 plan that is attached to the current 2009 Disposition Development Agreement, in which the property was actually transferred from the city to the DDA. So you're all familiar now with this plan from 10 years ago and the Disposition Development Agreement between the City Council and the DDA. And so this plan, it's kind of hard to read because north is off to the right, not at the top. But here's Center Street. It did not have Woodland Hardware associated with this. It was out of those other plans from 2005, 2006. Then in 2010, And I should say that Beth Cosley was the executive director who was hired in October 2008. And the disposition development agreement, as you're aware, had a very aggressive, I'll say, timeline for development to occur. So nothing had happened in the first year, 2008. Beth Cosley did contract with the Larson Group to come up with a plan that integrated Woodland Hardware into it. So you can see the Woodland Hardware footprint here, and had mixed use, retail, and a conference center associated with it. And this is what the traffic study was based on. A great deal, large hotel, lots of retail, and a little bit of mixed-use residential. And here's a drawing of that 2010 hotel that was proposed at the southern end of Woodland Station. And it moved forward with a preliminary plat. So Woodland Hardware was on board in order to subdivide this property, and it was not subdivided. It was conveyed through what's called a meets and bounds deed. And so the first step in a subdivision is a preliminary plat. It's the most important step of all. This plat is no longer valid because preliminary plats are only valid for 2 years. And this one was valid for 3 years because a final plat was recorded for Woodland Hardware. So filing number 1 has been recorded, and the lot number 2 has never been platted or recorded in a final plat. And if it were to be done, then it would be Woodland Station filing number 2, lot 1. So this preliminary plat was based on that previous Larson plan with the hotel and retail in this area, 2 streets. This was first named Depot Avenue, and then we changed it. But the street, the Saddle Club Avenue, was proposed to go through East and West to West Street, and then Center Street, north and south. And I grabbed just a photo out of the traffic report because based on that full build-out, there were several improvements that were associated with this build-out. But as you know, right now, it's only built out with the Woodland Hardware facility. And here is the final plat, or the site plan for Woodland Hardware, which shows Center Street and Saddle Club Avenue. So those new streets were bonded, were put in by the DDA, and that was in 2012. And that what happened shortly after Beth Cosley became ill, and then in May of 2012, David Buttery took over, and the staff helped with the Redomals to successfully construct and sell this property. Then in 2014, there was a concept plan that was built around Woodland Hardware that included the mixed-use area that was thinking about the beer garden and the recreation center, the bowling alley, and some of those things. But you'll see that this also included the AmeriGas property and the what I'm going to call the Robinson property. So there was always this thought that the surrounding properties needed to redevelop in concert with what was happening on the Saddle Club property. And then this was just a highlight of the various ownership of these properties. So AmeriGas is in pink. Vetra Bank owned this smaller lot. The city has since purchased that for $100,000. Here's lot 2, the retail. This is all in this kind of light green is owned by the DDA, and lot 6. And here's the Robinson property, and I can't recall the Christian who owns this. Oh, Richardson. Robertson is here, Richardson is here. So this was the ownership. And then in 2014, this was the concept for the beer garden and the AmeriGas development and Lot 2 development. And it also showed potentially the rec center, the bowling alley, and of course Woodland Hardware is shown on this site. Then 2014, the aquatic center and the bowling alley, that was figured into this area south of Saddle Club property, and that was discussed in 2014. And this was in September of 2012 is when Brian Fleer became the executive director through the 2014 agreement with UNRU. Again, another kind of rework, trying to figure out how the drainage was going to work around the aquatic center, and shared parking with the bowling alley, and the Corzequas ended up walking away from this, I believe because of financing. Is that right, Mark? And here in 2015, another overall site plan that was the beer garden and AmeriGas, the aquatic center, and the bowling alley. Another one in April of 2015. And then in 2015, April, the UNRU project, I'll call it, came along in conjunction with the beer garden, and this was going to be the first mixed-use 4,000 square foot footprint, and so it went through a fairly rigorous design modification, and the renderings that were reviewed by the Design Review Committee and Brian Fleer. I did not get involved in this until about halfway through the design review of these 9 apartments, 3 retail spaces, and then the applicant withdrew in the summer. Arden Weatherford's project, which was in conjunction with the UNRU project, was to have a shelter in this area that would also serve for festivals and events. And you can see that they were working, Weatherford and UNRU were working together to develop Lot 2. It was a phased approach, so that there would be temporary parking and detention and other things associated with this plan. Then the aquatic center was moving along, and actually the designs were done for punching through Saddle Club Avenue, rerouting the drainage around the west and south side of the aquatic center, And then it was decided after these construction drawings were created and the cost estimates were done that the infrastructure was just going to be too expensive. And as you know, the school district stepped in and donated land to the city at the school. Then so when that fell apart in 2016, the DDA came up with a concept of using the property somewhat as is, and Tanner did present this plan in great detail to the city council here recently. So I'll just flip through a few of these 2016 plans that was designed to accommodate tents and I'll call it field parking, temporary parking on the site. And the last plan that was officially approved was a grading plan in order to create terraced areas on the site. So that's just a quick overview of the history of this 9 acres for the last 18 years. Any questions?
No questions. This is a very good PowerPoint that you put together. Would you be able to send that to Mary Jo so that we could all have that?
Absolutely. And then you can look at it more closely in terms of the financial things that were approved through the years and their references, the ordinances and minutes where those decisions occurred. You
Good.
bet.
Thank you, Sally. Has council and new staff seen this and familiar with it too?
The new staff has. I've not done this type of presentation with council, but most of the council have been around through the history of this, but it is available to them.
Good. Well, hopefully some of them are watching today too. Thank you. This was a very nice presentation. It's hard to believe the activity that has happened on that site since we've had it to have nothing. It's just amazing. So we're going to change that.
Okay.
Look, you bet. Thank you very much, Sally. Okay, well, since we're talking about Woodland Station, we'll just move right on into it. The proposed ordinance of 1348. Excuse me. Tanner, would you like to take that? And I know we've got to have some discussion about that. We all went to the workshop. We were at the council meeting. We are still waiting for their next step, I guess. Does anyone know any more? I do not.
Yeah.
Ellen?
The next step is sending it to the Planning Commission for recommendations.
And that is coming tomorrow night?
No. Several weeks, 2 weeks?
2 weeks? Okay.
So the City Council decided to refer this ordinance to the Planning Commission, and that's a very appropriate approach because any changes to the zoning chapter, which is Title 18, the Planning Commission must hold a public hearing associated with those amendments to Title 18. So the Planning Commission's approach is to first discuss these amendments to the zoning regulations in a workshop setting. So we have scheduled a workshop for July 11th, which the whole meeting will be for discussing the Woodland Station overlay and get the Planning Commission's kind of consensus on the direction to move forward. And the original draft of this ordinance was prepared by the city attorney, Jason Myers. So we will be drilling down into the language. I handed it out last Thursday, and asked the Planning Commission to become very familiar with Chapter 1831, and I probably will do a similar history for them so that they understand that when this pie-in-the-sky plan came along, there were design standards associated with this development and how it fits into and why the overlay district was established on the 9 acres.
That's good, because there really were good reasons for that to happen, so that's good for moving forward like that. Does the board have any comment on this proposal? That's how I said no.
No, there's a comment from Tanner.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tanner.
Oh, well, a couple of things. First, a question is for Sally regarding amendments to Title 18 and these types of changes. How often is this done without the request of the property owner being part of the process? Does this typically happen at the initiation of the council?
Amendments to Title 18 are not very frequent. It's usually a code that is either obsolete or that there is some housekeeping that's needed or it presents a problem. Our most recent change to Title 18 dealt with self-storage units, and we had a very restrictive 300 square foot maximum size, so that was removed from the code in order to allow for greater flexibility. So as far as the property owner, usually they don't apply to a specific property, so this is somewhat unusual to have an overlay district that is based on a specific property as opposed to a zoning classification. And this was directed by City Council. And as you know, City Council has a disposition development agreement in which they have great interest in seeing that come to fruition.
Thanks.
Thank you. Did you have another question?
Well, just some comment. I read through the ordinance, the proposed ordinance, and it seems to me that it aims at substantial change to our posture as a body with regard to the property and the intended use and goals for the property and the restrictions and obligations associated with the property, and it's pretty significant. You know, the future of downtown is important to me and probably many of us, and so this type of significant change is not immaterial. I don't take it very lightly, and when reading the ordinance, there are a number of things that bother me. I think it might be prudent of us as a body to establish a position. We are, after all, the owners. We represent the ownership of the property, are tasked with carrying out the plans, and should probably have some sort of position that we can offer up to the council and or the planning commission, the community at large, as to what our position on it is. So,
Well, and I think that we have made a position on it, asking for consideration to the change for those 4 amendments to that contract to give us the ability to negotiate with new developers that come and request an audience with us, to know that we have a set of standards that we can, in our toolbox, that we could go to and know for sure that this is the way it is, and no cloudy areas, which this contract does have some obsolete and cloudy areas. And we just went through a lawsuit which really said that it is difficult to give that property away in a legal status for us, and we really do need to consider that and have the flexibility of that, but not be required for that. So I think that we have given direction. Have we changed that direction as a board to what we've asked in our amendments for them to do?
Every time it's come up, the board hasn't changed its position. And I guess that in part is what troubles me with this ordinance. It seeks a very different direction for us and very different changes, none of which were what we had requested. So the amendment that you mentioned included a very specific set of recommendations, some changes that we agreed to, captured in writing with the assistance of our attorney, and submitted to the council as a recommendation, a very calculated next step to reduce vulnerabilities and risks and improve flexibility. And that largely had gone by the wayside, and this ordinance came up that repostures us in a very different way. And for instance, it reads that the City of Woodland Park Council finds, determines, and declares that it is in the public's best interest to provide a greater variety of cost-effective housing types within the overlay district, and goes on to remove the restriction for residential use of the main ground floor in Woodland Station in the overlay. Well, when I read that, I disagree. I think that's perhaps short-sighted and doesn't consider the value, the difference in value to the general public and the central business district of commercial development versus residential. So to allow residential on the ground floor comes at some sacrifice in value, property tax, sales tax generation, and other things. I think this ordinance, the way it's written, puts us in a pretty compromised position, and I would hate to see it move forward. And the Planning Commission is about to deliberate it, and there may be some considerations that we may be wise in helping them understand some things. So, for instance, we are subject to some requirements, constitutional and legal requirements, that seem to have been neglected when considering this ordinance and drafting it. And specifically, we're required to receive fair value for the conveyance of public asset. And that's something that a lot of people in general don't seem to really understand, including this board, as we've struggled with it over the years and contemplating the various disposition and development agreements and plans that we just saw Sally presented. And so I have had the benefit, I suppose, of reading our attorney's advice many times. His numerous emails over the years, partly because of the lawsuit, I had to review a lot of documentation and correspondence. And one thing that Paul has spelled out for us over and over and over and very consistently and spanning many years is the importance of this fair value requirement. So I drafted some comments about that, and if you're okay with it, I'd like to read a little bit from that to see if it makes sense to you guys and if it might be a basis for a formal position regarding this ordinance and or anything else going forward.
Yes, I would welcome them, because I think that we need to make sure that we are presenting to council and staff our true feelings and why. I'm not sure our communication has been good, so please do.
Yeah. Okay, so this is tied very much to the requirement to convey the land for no cash consideration, okay, which we proposed via the proposed amendment number 2, removing, so that the DDA would have the option of conveying land for cash. Right now, as the 09 agreement reads, the city and DDA agree that the DDA will convey the land for no cash, but for fair value. I think that's really absolutely critical, and that's where some of these comments are very much based. So, in short, this is my understanding. Put it out there for everybody. The DDA does not have to convey land for no cash according to the IRS. Okay? In fact, conveying the land for no cash creates legal problems for the DDA, and here's why. Where public assets are concerned, the Colorado Constitution and state statutes have been written to protect taxpayer investment. To do this, they require that the public receive fair value when selling assets, meaning the government isn't allowed to buy land with taxpayer money and sell it below fair value. That would violate the Constitution and the statute, not to mention increase taxpayer vulnerability to corruption and cronyism. If it were legal...
Yes?
I hate to interject, but you're misstating the law and you're not concerned. Mr. Benedetti and I and the bond council have already come to an understanding on this issue. And I think it's inappropriate when you're discussing the ordinance and tying in the development agreement. The city is in the process of responding to the development agreement. We'll have those changes here hopefully in the next week or two. But to be said, the Constitution does not state exactly what you're portraying to the board.
I didn't state exactly what it says. I'm not quoting the Constitution. I'm referring to things Paul has told us specifically. Article 11, Section 2 requires fair value.
Okay. Are you working with Paul, Jason?
Yes.
Now writing this up?
We've addressed this issue.
Okay.
And as was brought up at the city council working session, there is flexibility both directions. The property can be donated for free. The property can be sold. There's requirements on either side. So to bring this up in a discussion in the context of the ordinance is ridiculous and inappropriate. We can have the discussions about whether you agree with the city's positions on the amendments, but is this discussion about the ordinance or is this discussion about the amendments?
This is discussion in general about our posture with the property and what we should do going forward or consider in terms of its value and how to best convey it in a manner that's consistent with the obligations or requirements on the DDA and in the best interest of the public. That's what it's about. I'd like to continue, if
That's not
if
how
I
this
may.
discussion started. This discussion was about the amendment, or about the ordinance. I apologize.
Because the ordinance and the amendment both aim at those things. How we're postured and how we are to move forward.
The DDA is a part of the city. You're not a separate entity that does your own thing. You're a part and intended to serve directly with council, not opposed to council.
Well, and I was under
opposing
the
council.
impression that we're to work together, that that's the design of what the DDA does and what the city does. We work together, and we just want to make sure that we are stating our concerns and working together with you. We were a little bit surprised to hear that ordinance come up when we were working on the amendments, and then the ordinance kind of surfaces, and we were at the meeting, did not hear direct direction from full council to do that, so we were a little bit surprised. So we are striving as a board to get as much information and facts as we can so we can present ourselves to council that this is what we feel we need to do our end of it, and we want to make sure that we convey that as a whole board. And I think Tanner's sharing his thoughts on that so that we can be informed about conversations that Benedetti's have had.
I'm pretty sure I stated this is my understanding of it.
Yeah, you said that these are your comments and notes about this. Is it much longer, Tanner?
No, it's probably about halfway through already.
Okay. Then try not to quote the law. Could you continue?
Right. So, however, DDAs are allowed to receive fair value in ways other than cash, such as via specific covenants, conditions, restrictions, and obligations that a developer would agree to. So here's an example. We, as the public, invested in property and have agreed that commercial development mixed with residential, all built to good-looking and higher quality architectural standards, would be in the public's best interest. Commercial development, generating sales tax, jobs, commercial traffic that benefits surrounding businesses and pays 4 times the property tax as other uses. Residential adds population to the downtown, helping to keep a healthy mix of uses, but has little other value in the central business district. To accomplish the high-quality mixed-use goal, we, a couple of key words, restrict the ground floor use to commercial, residential being on second or third floors or somewhere other than the ground floor, and we obligate any development to a higher set of architectural standards through the design review process. This is very much how things are structured right now, and have been for some time. These restrictions and obligations make the development more costly to a developer, and so to balance the deal, we offer the land for no cash consideration. That's the fair trade. We provide the land free, but only if a developer is ready, willing, and able to meet the special requirements. In our case, right now, we are in agreement to convey the land for no cash, meaning $0 for the land that we've paid $2 million taxpayer dollars for. And we're requiring the developer to build commercial on the ground floor and meet design review requirements that are above and beyond the normal central business district standards. That's how we achieve the fair value in ways other than cash. However, and this comes back to posturing us going forward and changes that have been considered. With this proposed ordinance, the ordinance seeks to eliminate the restriction on the ground floor residential and the obligation that the development be held to the higher architectural and design standards via the design review process with the DDA. But it does not remove the no cash sale price. So it changes one side of the equation, and on the other side of the equal sign, it doesn't change anything, which I think puts us seriously out of balance. That it seems that would compromise our ability to strike a fair deal that is consistent with our requirements for fair value. It doesn't make it easier. It seems to make it harder. Paul Benedetti recently said, in writing, the Woodland Station property can be sold for cash. The no cash covenant was eliminated by bond attorneys when the hardware site sold for $200,000+ in connection with the tax-exempt vector financing. It has not appeared in any other financing document prepared by Kutak Rock since. The sale proceeds can be used for a public purpose such as paying for public improvements, prepaying debt, or for a variety of other uses that in no way endanger the tax-exempt status of the vector bonds. Carrying out the plan of development itself is a public purpose. There was quite a discussion recently about the tax law requiring a no cash transfer of land. If true, the outstanding tax-exempt vector bonds approved by the city would be taxable. Kutak Rock confirmed in an email a few days ago that the tax law does not require a no cash transfer. Land is sold for cash by DDAs and URAs much more than not, and failure to require cash raises a much more troubling issue of compliance with constitutional and statutory fair value requirements. of Section 3125-808, Part 2 of the DDA law. The DDA and the City Council are charged with considering the uses, restrictions, covenants, conditions, and obligations assumed by the purchaser in purchasing and developing the property. Eliminating uses and design criteria makes compliance with legal requirements much more of a problem if any conveyance does not involve a cash payment. I think that's really, really important.
And that is from Paul Benedetti, that whole statement.
Correct.
Okay.
In writing, and I think you all have a copy.
And am I correct in saying that the Woodland Hardware would not have happened, that loan would have not gone through had there not been a cash
Correct. At
purchase?
the time.
So it could go either way.
Right.
We need to have the flexibility to do either.
Right, and so I'm just going back to the ordinance, and in any position we may take or may not,
Okay.
that recommendation we might give to Planning Commission or to Council, that the ordinance removes restriction and obligation, but does not remove the no cash consideration. So it's incomplete. And if the aim for the community truly is cost-effective housing solutions in the central business district at the heart of the downtown, then that may lack sufficient benefit and value to the public to be considered fair value for a no-cash conveyance of the land, which puts us in a compromised position. We have to get fair value. I don't see that in cost-effective housing solutions, where I would with some commercial or mixed use, particularly coupled with architecture and design standards. Those represent the covenants, conditions, restrictions, and obligations that we are required to impose if we're marking down the property below its market value.
Okay. So, board, does that help you? Oh, Sally, did you?
I just made
two tabs on the shirt.
It's not giving me a green light.
Oh, will that work? See if,
Check.
okay.
The ordinance does two things. Does not change Title 18.31 dramatically. It in 18.31 was put in place to provide flexibility and streamline the process for a developer. It removed all the conditional uses in the central business district, of which housing is one of them. So it was putting the uses into a permitted use process. A permitted use process is an administrative review, but it did include a review by the DDA's Design Review Committee. And during the time that Woodland Hardware was going through the process, there were 3 members of DDA on that committee. There's an associated resolution, 677, that established the design standards or guidelines. Those guidelines are maybe 4 pages of aspiration and harmony with the neighborhood, with the character of Woodland Park. They can be interpreted very subjectively. So there was a design review committee established for the DDA to apply those designs guidelines. Woodland Hardware, when it went through the process, several of those guidelines were waived. And the design review does say that you can waive those design guidelines. It depends upon the design review committee. What this ordinance does is it removes the design review committee in itself, but there is still a design process. It does not remove the design guidelines. The guidelines are still there. So Tanner is concerned about quality design, and it's not removing the quality design. It's helping streamline the process so that a developer, what they want is certainty. They want a certain process so that they know what to anticipate. They will work within that process. So that it's not a removal of the quality of the design. It's just that it's very onerous to have both a staff review and another board or committee review. And it has been difficult with both Woodland Hardware and the Unruh project. So what City Council wants to do is streamline the process so that there is certainty. It is not removing the flexibility or the quality of the design. Now, with respect to the housing, that came out of the DDA board because you were reviewing a project, the Unruh project, that had housing on the ground floor, which was in violation of the overlay district. So that was added to this ordinance because it had previously been a hurdle for development. So, but nothing has been adopted. We are starting the process of review with the Planning Commission, and the DDA and the general public will have ample opportunities to express their opinions about these proposed changes.
And that's kind of what this conversation is at this meeting, rather than going into an executive session, is for us to discuss some of these things so that we can go to planning and know where we stand on these issues and what we would like to see and why. Tanner?
Well, I think Sally just said what City Council wants to do, and I didn't catch that from City Council. In fact, I watched as they voted this down. If we're to remove these, and I'm not, I recognize that this is not removing the standards. What I do see is that it removes this body's ability to ensure them, because it puts that review process into the city's hands and subject to be changed by the city and without the DDA's authority or agreement, and that makes it harder, not easier, for the body to ensure fair value if indeed the property is being sold for less than its fair market value. I keep stressing that because that's what it comes down to. I'm not opposing changing the review process, the committee, the guidelines, etc. But those considerations, if we're to do something like that, needs to be balanced with the requirement that the land be conveyed for no cash. That's the problem. That is expensive taxpayer land. These taxpayers, Woodland Park, have paid an awful lot of money for that, and if it's going to go into private hands for no money, the taxpayers must be receiving something of public benefit for that. And that's where we're at. It needs to be balanced. This ordinance doesn't do that. As it is, this puts us in a more compromised position relative to the requirements for fair value.
Okay, Ellen, you have some comment?
I think we may be assuming this ordinance is a done deal, whereas I feel it's the first step in a negotiations. And I am on Planning Commission, and Vicki Good, sitting in the audience, is as well. I think it was pointed out that this is not quasi-judicial for the planning commissioners, so it's legislative. We can talk to the planning commissioners individually before that meeting or get in touch with them. I think many of them, now John DeVoe is the chairperson, of course he's a long time former DDA member, so he is very informed about this. But I think many of the other planning commissioners really are, they could give a fresh input to this, and I think we will all read it in depth and go from there. That's my opinion.
And that's good. That's good. Well, I think that in lieu of time, because we definitely want to hear George Christensen's comments, and I think that what Tanner has read, what we have talked about here, I think this is important for us to think about, because we need to go on to planning with something in our minds as a group that we agree on in order to have conversation with planning too and understanding. Do you agree with that? Any comment on that?
Well, I feel that I, as a planning commissioner and a DDA board member, probably could not go vote on the board's recommendation to planning.
Okay. Okay, yes. Yes, if we'll take time.
Great, thank you. First and foremost, I really appreciate this conversation. I think we need to do this more often. You kind of alluded to the fact that the ordinance came out of nowhere. Ordinances come out of nowhere all the time, and that's why we have this process. And so that's appreciated. Tanner, I want to be sure that we separate this new ordinance and the disposition agreement. And again, it's been alluded to that, we're just kind of forgetting what was brought to us. And we've asked more than once, because of the fact that we have a new city attorney, to give us some time and that we would get back to you. We had a tremendous executive session that clearly I can't talk about, but I will say this: all of DDA is going to be happy with the way we'd like to move forward. And please don't forget that council wants the same as you do. We want the best for the community. We don't want to give away land when it's not right. We don't want to take money for land when it's not right. We want it to be the right deal. So please don't characterize what the council wants, because I don't think that council knows what they want. What I might want, what others might want, might be 7 different things, as you all well know. And so give us some time with the disposition agreement. You're going to be seeing it this week, I believe. And so that'll put that to rest. I'm the one that brought forward the new ordinance, which mayors can do. So make no mistake about it. And my reasoning and thought behind it is simple. The less barrier to entry, in my opinion, all you less government people have been pushing me this way a long time. The less government involvement, the easier it is for people to enter. And so I just believe that, and we alluded to it before, we had this 18 years ago, and so there was an overlay put in because this is what we want to do. At this point, I'm not sure exactly if we know what we want to do. What's wrong with removing the overlay, letting it go through the review committee, and the planning like it always does. The planning commission, I think, everyone will agree. Look at what we've done to the Sonics and the Walmarts and all the buildings that have come to town that have wanted something, but we've mandated really to kind of fit into the community. And so that idea of working together, I just think, I wish you could tell me the downside of not having the overlay and making it easier for people like the review committee, making it easier for the likes of George Christian to come into our community. I don't see the downside of that.
The only downside that I'm bringing up is the no cash part of the transaction.
This is different, but
it's
Tanner...
not. It's the transaction is going to be subject to all of it. It's not, I understand an ordinance may be different from an amendment to an agreement, but it's all part of the same posture on the same property and the type of terms that this DDA can agree to where public assets are concerned. And that's valuable land where a lot of money's been spent. And just like Sonic and just like Walmart, Mayor, I agree with you. I agree with you on those things. But they bought their property.
Understand. And
That's all I'm saying.
Just give us the time until you see the new disposition agreement, and we go from there.
Then
Okay.
we'll look forward to that.
Okay, and
We'll
you'll
look forward
be
to
seeing it this week. Okay? Thanks very much.
Sure.
This
And-
kind of discussion where we all don't agree, we need to have it more often.
We do.
Because you get a lot of things accomplished. You really do. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, well, we need to have more conversation about this, and before we go to planning, and before we have the public hearings, that kind of thing. We'll have more discussions about a board so that we understand better. So we'll look forward to their comments on this new proposal. I'd like to go right to George Christian and introduce him to the board. I know that I have talked to him for the last 2 or 3 years several times, and so has Tanner. I think, George, and I'd like to have you tell this board what you have already done in Woodland Park and whether you can tell us who you represent, that you will be representing a serious developer. Probably on the mic because it has to be recorded. And thank you for getting up this morning, George, at this wee hour and joining us.
There's the board, and honestly, I'm not sure, after sitting through the last hour, what to say. I guess I am that person that continues to try that sees the vision of the Woodland Station. I've seen it for quite a while and has tried several occasions to bring ideas or concepts. I'm not filthy rich. I do have a lot of contacts. A couple of years back, I had a large group. Became very interested in this project. And there was a lawsuit. So I went to the sidelines and built a lot of houses in town. Continue to try to do that. I've got to run to a meeting right now in that regard. I do have a very real suspect. They have a real tie to the city that came through Keras. They're very involved. They're donors. They operate a very successful business, Smoky Mountains, in a number of locations. They came to me because they had stayed in a couple of our houses that we built that become Airbnbs, which is, by the way, a great way to bring prospects to town, because they just came to vacation here, which I'd never thought of that. It's a place to vacation in Colorado. But people out of state do, even people from Smoky Mountains. And in that process of vacationing, they said, we'd love to have one of these units. They began that conversation with us of where that could be. We didn't have a spot. A week or so ago, they were here, and I was showing them some spots that are possibilities where that could be. And they mentioned we would love maybe to have our business here. It's the first time that ever mentioned. And maybe even have a unit above it or two. And I said, we just made a U-turn and drove right down into the area there and parked and got out and walked around. And that's where that conversation started. That was just a week or so ago. Very real people, real money in their pocket, really interested. Long conversation with them last night in the middle of my 73rd birthday party I just had. And distraught of my little granddaughters to stop and talk to these folks about this meeting that they are waiting for me to call them back and say, how do we move forward? And I think the answer would be, my experience has been every time that I've brought someone, it seems like we all load up our guns, get in big circles, and start shooting each other in the foot. And I feel that we're back to that, and I'm afraid if I say much more, I'm going to be putting ammunition in the gun and shooting myself in the foot along with all of it. So there are real folks that want to come. I'm not sure what the politics are, and I don't want to be in the middle of the politics. But there's an incredible piece of property in the middle of a beautiful town, and the economy is such right now that there's people that want to come and look at the possibility of doing something, this group or some other group or who knows what group. But getting to roadblocks every time soon makes people want to just go somewhere else. Because there are, I mean, this is not the deal, there are other options, and they just reach upon us saying, you know, what's down the road? And they're looking for the path of least resistance, whatever that is, however that gets worked out amongst all of these powerful groups within a little town like this. When a prospect, real money, and very connected, real connection to this city that wants to be here, and even wanted some housing, and now they wanted business, and they want to combine, and there's a perfect spot for that. When they see that kind of resistance, and when I go back, and I'm not even sure right now what my answer, probably just won't call. I don't know what to tell them, other than you're stepping into a briar patch for a moment, and I thought after the litigation and all that briar patch is over, and now we got the next, load up the gun for the next briar patch. That will continue. That continues. All of this pie in the sky dream will never happen. And that's just an absolute shame. So, all I can say is there's real folks really interested, looking for a place to sit down and get busy, because it takes a while to get these things up and built and over.
And George, I would like to say to you, this board really wants this to happen. And we really want to make it as easy done as possible. We know we have to jump through city hoops, always have to, but we would like to have the opportunity to do everything in our power to work with the developer, to work with you, to make this happen, to come up with something that's good for our community, and try to eliminate. I don't know how this got so off track. We felt the same way, that now that this lawsuit is over, now we can move forward. Now we can put some energy in the property, stage it for development, and here you are. You know, and we really want this to happen. We want to talk to them. We want to do everything we can to help them. Right now we own the property. I don't know how long that'll happen. It's up to the city. You know, it's the fact that we're having this issue of working together that seems to be the roadblock, and quite frankly, this board doesn't really understand that. We were all ready to bury hatchets, let's move forward, let's do this together, and we feel the same frustration that we feel bushwhacked again and again. And I would like to tell you, George, please don't give up on us. We are going to work with the city. We are going to work through this, and we really want to start negotiating and talking with you as to what you want. We'll have executive sessions so that it isn't out who's who. If that's what you need, whatever you need, tell us, because we really want to make this work.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think...
Can I say that for this board?
Just to clear that.
Does anybody disagree with what I just said? Okay, George, then we all agree with that. Now, please say what you said.
No, I said
interrupted.
that, you know, what any prospect needs is just a real clear path. Who owns it? What do you have to do to acquire it? What are the steps to development? And how fast can you get that done? Because there's a seasonal aspect to this community, and then there's a seasonal aspect to this economy.
Yes.
And we're in a very good cycle of this economy, and who knows how long it'll last. And we'll be back in doldrums for however many years at some point. Just that's a normal cycle. And these opportunities won't come as readily.
Exactly.
You're in a good place because if this one didn't work, I think others will come. It's a good time, but now's the time.
I think Tanner?
Well, with now being the time, let's maybe put the rubber to the road. George, I think you're familiar with the design guidelines in place on the property? Okay, it's a document. Do you have a copy? Do you need us to send it to you?
I have some of that. I think that before any group would want to begin to spend design money, and their product, their building is a very Smoky Mountain design, so it adapts on pretty quickly.
I saw that in your letter of intent. You mentioned that.
But people want to, just perhaps the steps of real estate, tie up a piece of property with an agreement that works for everybody, and then go create the documents that get it forward through planning and all those different processes.
Totally with you.
I mean, for the life of me, I don't know how you do that.
Well, I think it starts with the proposal. So if you can formalize something to present, how much property for what use, and you've alluded to it, but there's not a proposal yet. There's a letter of intent and some conversation.
I understand that, but if I walk into your store, I don't have to guess what's for sale or at what price. I can very clearly say, oh, this is a beautiful painting. I've got several hanging in my home. And I know what they cost. Hope they're worth more now than they were when I bought them. In the real world, a prospect says, where is it, what is it, how much, what's the problem, and that's what I don't know how to tell them.
Well,
I'm not going to figure out how to tell anybody that exactly. So I come back and say, what's the possibility, and the answer is bring a proposal.
The answer is, per the documents we're subject to, the price is zero. You will not be paying any cash for the land. But your proposal must be consistent with our foundation plan, the overlay district, the Title 1831 that Sally's mentioned, the design standards, and you must be willing to go through that design review process, which we have established, I can tell you now, between the city and DDA is a concurrent process. So when you do get to design, any design submitted go through city and DDA simultaneously. And that's how it's set up right now. There has been this recent effort by the DDA. We initiated it in January, and the city's been deliberating, since March. And this ordinance and the amendment and all is aimed at changing some of those things to try and streamline things as you're talking about. So, but right now, today, nothing has really changed from the way it was set up in 2009. So the price is zero unless the city changes that in an agreement or we negotiate something different.
And I appreciate that, and I think the unless is the issue. And their answer may be, let me know when the unless is not there, and then let's talk about it.
Okay, we're hearing that. City, are you hearing that as well? And they said that they have things in work, so let's hope for the best as quickly as possible. George, can we set up a time that we can talk again with just you and what you think your people are talking about?
I'm here multiple times a week.
Okay, Sally?
For the benefit of a potential applicant, no one on the DDA mentioned your application process. Does that still apply? Is that part of the proposal that you're asking for?
That's an application for a TIF reimbursement agreement. So that's really up to the applicant. When they build the property and begin to pay property taxes, the tax increment becomes the revenue of the DDA, and if the applicant wants to receive reimbursement, that is the application form.
and I'm not quite sure we're there yet. Right now, what we're doing is scaring our developer away. And that's what's happening, is we're scaring them away again. And we can't do that, because that isn't what this is about. And George, can we, board, I would ask you, could we meet in 2 weeks on a Tuesday? Can we meet in 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Can you do that, George, with us? Just sit down and talk with us about your intentions, about what your maybe some pictures, just something that we can sit down and talk about so that we can make this happen as simply as possible. This shouldn't be so hard. When somebody's dying to spend their money in your town and develop it, we should be open-armed about it. And that's what we want to do. We're just in the process of figuring out how to get there. Does 2 weeks work? Al, go ahead.
Mary Jo, I can certainly see certain of these frustrations and what have you that's been going on for years here. And I see the complexities of a variety of bureaucratic processes, departments, all having to have a say in the matter. And this goes across a wide spectrum of bureaucracy. Is this property for sale or is it not?
Yes.
Okay, if it's for sale, then potentially a buyer could enter into a purchase contract through negotiations to a viable price. Once they control the property and have closed upon it, then they can proceed into the development of a proposal, develop the plans and the financing. DDA may be involved in this. Certain standards will be, through the city planning department as appropriate. And then this is when the application comes in for the TIF reimbursements, if this is appropriate for part of the design process. We've got way too many personalities, way too much bureaucracy that's holding stuff like this back. We don't need that.
No, we don't. And George is leaving. Before he leaves, George, would you come back in 2 weeks?
I've got a meeting at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
No, I don't want you to do that. Yes. Can you come back in 2 weeks?
So to move this thing, something like...
Okay.
To move something like this forward, the first step to me is to control the property. As the developer, that's what they would want. Mm-hmm. Isn't that the first step? Now, they can have other plans for the property. That's okay. But you want to buy it. And forget about all the various nuances and, side steps and what have you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I totally agree, but we have to make this easier. This can't keep happening. It just happens over and over and over for 25 years. So now it goes to... We got 5 minutes left. We're going to have to table a lot of these other 2 issues to the next meeting. So,
Mary Jo, I might even put this a little perspective. You've got a shop here in town. Mm-hmm. You own the shop and the property there.
Yes.
If somebody wants to buy it because they have a design on doing something with it, they're going to buy the property first, aren't they?
Yes.
How many people are involved? You, your attorney, the buyer, and their attorney, and it's done.
And the title.
I know it sounds simplistic, but you look at what we've got here. We've got, 9 people here. We've got city people of all sorts, and committees and commissions and what have you. No wonder it's a bureaucratic mess. This is frustrating to me.
Well, it is to all of us.
They may want to know about the TIF.
Mary Jo?
Well,
Yes,
but
Murph.
we can't make that definition
Hang on.
until we know what the project is. And
Okay,
various
Murph.
regulations. That comes second, or down the line a ways.
Murph. Yes.
Okay, I think that's kind of an oversimplification of it, because we are not dealing with private property. We are dealing with public property. Okay? When it comes down to it, it's always an issue of money. and control. There are special requirements. That's why the laws are written that way, okay? The property is up for development. We want to see it developed, all right? And money is always the issue in development. Money's the issue with everything, okay? And if there was a developer that saw the true return on investment, we've got two investors here. We have the taxpayer. The DDA is responsible for protecting the taxpayer's interest and their investment, to see to it that the taxpayer, the city at large, receives a return on that investment. And then we've got the second investor coming in, who is the developer. They have to, if they have investors, they have to see a return on investment, okay? There are people who go out and buy businesses, failing businesses, for tax breaks, okay? We want to see this be a long-term success for not only the developer, but for the taxpayer as well, okay? Cost-effective is a relationship between cost and productivity. And there's a reason why banks these days see development as a high-risk lending status. So we are not only responsible, we want to see it developed, no doubt. Everybody does. It's just how we get down that road, and because we have to protect the taxpayer interest and assist the developer in seeing to it that he gets a return on investment for his investors or himself, is where it's at. I don't think anybody wants to come in here and establish a business or do something that's going to be a loss type business as a tax shelter. And we don't want to see that either. Okay, so we're walking, this is a tightrope that government put the taxpayer into, and it's a tightrope that we're going to have to walk. And seeing it done correctly and balanced is what we're going to have to do. So it's not as simple as a private land sale between private people.
Well, I think we're at 9 o'clock, so we need to wind this meeting down.
I'm done.
And go ahead, Murph.
I'm done.
Okay.
It's just food for thought for the next meeting.
Okay, we will. Mark?
Mary Jo, Board, is it possible for me to get on the agenda for the August 6th meeting? I figure y'all could use,
Sure. Sure,
I
that's
figure
no
y'all
problem.
could use some good news.
Okay.
I've got a client that I'm working with that is interested in a specific use for Woodland Station, and we'd like to make a presentation.
Okay. You are on the agenda.
So it'd be under the Woodland Station section, and we'll need about 10 or 15 minutes if that's okay.
Sure.
And we'll bring our team to make the presentation.
Okay. Great, Mark. We're glad to have you. You bet. This is what this is all about, is development. And we will get back with George and see if we can't meet with him again. And hopefully it will not be so discouraging. I would like to, yes, okay, Vicki, once, and then Debbie, and then we will adjourn.
One thing I'd like to say is when you're trying to develop a piece of property as a person that's coming to the table, 2 weeks can be a lifetime when you're trying to make decisions. I think next Tuesday we should have a meeting. And if you guys are prepared, as well as the other gentlemen, to present what they're doing as far as, waiting 2 weeks is too long. That is red tape.
Tanner?
That is red tape.
The city's told us that they're working on some documentation and things to bring forward. Can we ask Jason, does Jason, do you think that draft will be out for us in the next week or two? Or what should we expect?
Real quick, I think the whole point that we talked about with the ordinance and this is that we don't believe either one would impact these immediate. I mean, the city council doesn't necessarily have to consider these for these two developers. The existing agreements and everything in place could be a part of it. I'll let Jason kind of talk about what
Yeah, so if there's applications and things presented, that's the law that applies at the time. We can't retroactively change anything that would then change the landscape for developers, because as has been mentioned today, developers want certainty. So when they put in their application, that's where the buck stops. All of the other process can continue.
Totally.
To your point, as far as the development agreement, my intention is to get a draft of that to City Council today, and they wanted to make sure that all of the language that has been discussed is, as I understood it, is what they understand it, and then I'll get that to Mr. Benedetti as soon as possible, who then will distribute it to the board. So I'm hoping that'll all happen this week. I don't want to rush the process and say to City Council necessarily, give me your comments by end of business today or else, and then have 2 weeks from now have a council member say, wait a minute, we can push the process as quick as we can. So I believe it's the city's intent, just as everybody's here. We want to see the process simplified if possible, but at the end of the day, we want the property to develop. And to your concerns as a DDA, you still own the property. You still are in charge of who it gets sold to and who it doesn't get sold to some degree. Any agreements that you create, the City Council still gets an opportunity to chime in on. So development standards, dispositions agreements, all of that stuff aside, you still have control of the property itself and what goes there. And to your point earlier, as far as a real estate transaction, if you simplify it to that degree, you give up that ability to make the control of what goes there. If you sell the property and it's gone, you don't get to decide whether or not this is another hardware store or an auto parts store or whatever it might be. If you do that development agreement and a real estate transaction kind of at the same time, we'll sell you the property for this price, expecting this development, or else the property reverts back to us. You can do those things. But anyways, I don't know if
Understand.
that answers your questions.
Mark? Exactly.
So our team, some of them are flying in this for our presentation. We got architects. So August 6th, probably
Time for us, okay.
But what I'm worried about is that they might go under contract with the other, and there's no option.
I'm not sure they're ready for contract. They left running, so.
This is a very long time when you are.
I understand.
If you want to give an illusion that you're going to pro-develop this, you have to be ready to move. You have to be. And telling somebody to come back in 2 weeks, that's red tape.
Mark?
Tomorrow.
This last time, we think you're going to really want to see this. Sorry to wait for another month. We want it to be just right and assemble our entire team.
Mark, is it mixed use?
No.
Is it residential?
No.
Interesting.
Okay.
You're going to like it. I promise you, you're going to like it.
Okay. Okay, this is five after here. We need to shut this down. We do need to talk about staff update and our board training. That kind of fell through, and that's really important to do right away. So I would like to schedule a meeting in 2 weeks, Tuesday from today, and we'll call you. So I would like to schedule a meeting for that to continue with this. We're going to talk about staffing update. We'd like to bring George back and talk with him more about that and less about the amendment and the proposal. And we will move forward in our August 6th meeting if we need to talk about it. Yes. Mm-hmm. Does that work for everybody? Well, you can call. July 16th. Okay. I know we have Debbie that has something she wants to say.
This is a big week. We have July 4th celebration going on here from 9 to 3 at Memorial Park. After that, we're encouraging people. There is a green production at Karis Bible College that begins at 6 o'clock. It will be over a little after 8. They can leave dare come back and watch the fireworks. So come to Woodland Park and spend your whole day here. And then, of course, on Friday is the Symphony Above the Clouds. We've encouraged that on KRDO. That is date night. Bring your data for symphony. And just quickly, I was out in Paris last night when our Bible conference is going on. There were about 800 adults there. They were asked to raise their hand if they were not from Colorado. Over 3/4 of them were not.
That's great. I've been seeing some in the store. It's wonderful. Have them. Would anyone else like to make a comment from the audience? If not, I'd like to make one and say our rodeo was awesome this year. We were full. Jan was there. She volunteered to help. Tanner was there. He had a booth. We had 3 full days and did not get rained out. We had one cowboy that was hurt. They took him in the ambulance. His body is traumatized, but he is not seriously injured. Nothing is broken. He's sore everywhere. That's a testament to Cowboy Tough, because it was a wreck. Tanner?
Thank you very much for organizing that and making sure that the rodeo and that heritage and culture remains alive and part of this community. I think it's very valuable, and I'm very grateful, Mary Jo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary Jo,
Yes.
too, all the traffic that was heading back from the weekend had to go slowly by and saw the rodeo grounds
Yep.
and the rodeo going on, so that was good PR. For
They
Woodland
had
Park.
stopped along the highway and were watching. They had their kids out on the hoods of their car. I said, oh man, we can't have that. So we had to call the police, and they came down and told them to go buy a ticket. Anyway, Tanner.
I'm sorry, real fast. It's time to mow at Woodland Station.
Oh, yes.
There is a local citizen very supportive of what we've been doing over there and has offered to mow the property.
Wow.
They have equipment and are willing to do it. Just need the property owner's consent to move forward, if that's okay.
Great. Do we have consent of this?
Yes.
Okay, consent. Move forward. Okay. Then do I hear a motion?
Move to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Second.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you for coming. Thanks, Murph. Oh. Off.